You're listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, presented by Trainer Road, cycling's most effective training tool.
My name is Stuart Snow. I followed pro cycling for about 2 decades, but you have added a whole new depth and dimension to my understanding and enjoyment of the sport.
Hi, I'm Liz Miller. I download the podcast and take the guys to bed with me. Have to say the husband is not amused when the bed often rocks with my laughter.
This is Spencer from Boulder. I let the exotic tales of faraway European races and the intrigue of insider gossip make me feel as though I'm there.
My name's Richard Moore. I'm with Daniel Friebe.
Hello.
And Lionel Birnie.
Hello.
Sorry, didn't allow the Lionel Richie joke there.
Got too much on my mind today.
You've got too much to say, haven't you? Because you're just back from Sanremo and Milan-San Remo.
Yeah, my head is full, it's bursting.
It looks full. Lionel, let's kick things off with the weekly roundup before we go into hearing all the stuff that Daniel has to say.
Well, yeah, only 2 stories this week, really. The first is Lizzie Armitstead won the Trofeo Alfredo Binda, her second World Tour victory of the season, and the other is Milan-San Remo, packed with stories which we'll be discussing later on in the episode. But in brief, there was a landslide after the Ticino. The peloton was briefly diverted onto the motorway for a bit. Big crash before the Cipressa, which caused all of the controversy. Giovanni Visconti and Ian Stannard attacked on the Cipressa. It all came back together again. Mikhail Kwiatkowski attacked on the Poggio. Then there was the descent. What are you laughing at there? You're laughing at the pronunciation.
I was just thinking that Mikhail Kwiatkowski is like a bête noire sent from hell to torture us every week.
It really is for our pathetic English accents. You've got a better chance than me, Daniel, but I thought that was a decent stab. No doubt our Polish listeners will correct me.
Kwiatkowski.
Of course, I'm half Polish, but I am absolutely hapless when it comes to pronouncing his name.
There was a brief counter-attack by Vincenzo Nibali at one stage, and then Fabian Cancellara led the chase that captured the Polish rider for Team Sky with about 1.3 kilometres to go. A little move from Edward Bosenhagen and Greg Van Avermaet, just over a kilometre to go. And then in the final 400 metres, Fernando Gaviria, he went down. Everybody else avoided him. Peter Sagan and Fabian Cancellara, impressively so. And then in the final sprint, Arnaud Démare, FDJ's French sprinter, took France's first monument victory since Laurent Jalabert. Ben Swift of Team Sky second and Jürgen Roland third.
Fantastic. I mean, the way you describe it there, Lionel, it sounds action-packed. And once again, watching a sort of live commentary of Milan-San Remo on Twitter, it was like it was a boring race. Everybody every year says Milan-San Remo is boring, but it always gives lots of talking points. And we're going to get on to the victory for Démare, the controversy that then erupted around Démare's victory, Kwiatkowski's attacks, Team Sky's tactics, which were pretty sound and pretty, came close to giving them their first monument. We'll talk about all of that, but first of all, you were there, Daniel, and you've got a little dispatch for us.
I have a little postcard from Sanremo. Lionel, I want you to look out for the chow mein joke, the play on words there. Ingenious. I was very proud of that.
Excellent. So let's hear now from Daniel in Sanremo.
The sounds of Via Roma almost exactly 24 hours before the 107th edition of Milan-San Remo will finish here. It's a busy, noisy Friday afternoon. People are heading home from work for the weekend. If I turn to my left, that is to the east, I can clearly see the outline of the famous Poggio di Sanremo, the climb that acts as a guillotine on so many riders' hopes, in what is the first and the most prestigious Italian one-day race of the cycling season. Via Roma itself is a fairly bland, unremarkable city street which completely transforms really into one of the most famous racetracks in the world of sport for a few hours on one day in March. From 2008 to 2014, for logistical reasons, the race finished one block down from here on the seafront, but Via Roma was happily restored last year. 12 months ago, I actually spoke to a Sanremo native, the former Giro d'Italia boss Michele Acquarone, about Via Roma, and he admitted that the road's place in cycling folklore sometimes slightly bemused the locals. Michele said that growing up, the parallel street, Corso Matteotti, was where everyone used to go for their afternoon stroll, their passeggiata, and most crucially, Michele said it was also where the prettiest girls used to hang out. The most remarkable thing about Via Roma for many years, besides the bike race, was that the town's first Chinese restaurant had opened there. I'm not going to go for chow mein now, but rather step inside the bookshop which overlooks where the finish line will be tomorrow, which has very kindly placed a tome written by yours truly in a Milan-San Remo themed window display. So let's find out what it's like to work on Via Roma and then go in search for a bit more local Sanremo colour. So signora, this is your bookshop and it overlooks the finish line for Milan-San Remo where the race is going to finish tomorrow. Signora, la tua libreria dà proprio sul traguardo di Milano-San Remo. Com'è vivere o lavorare comunque sulla Via Roma?
The rest of the year it's great, but on the day of the race we're closed until after the finish. But yeah, it's nice here.
Però si sta bene.
Lei ha vissuto per tanto tempo qua, tutta la vita, immagino. You've been here for a long time. All your life, have you lived in Sanremo?
Sì, da quando aperto la
I've been here for 13 years since the bookshop opened.
And how has Sanremo changed as time has gone on, as the years have gone on? Come si è cambiata la città col passare del tempo?
Dappertutto uguale, penso.
The whole town's the same, I think. The town's the same, the finish is the same. Although the town has changed a bit, like everywhere in Italy. The people have changed, the faces, because of tourism and immigration. But the fabric of life, let's say, is the same.
Però il tessuto rimane sempre lo stesso poi alla fine.
E ho notato in vetrina un libro molto speciale, un libro che ho scritto io. And you have a book that's very special in your window. It was a book that I personally wrote, so I'm not being very modest here, a bit of self-promotion, but l'abbinamento tra Sanremo, comunque il ciclismo, rimane sempre forte.
Sì, decisamente. Sanremo ce l'ha nel cuore.
Yes, Sanremo has cycling in its heart, without a doubt. It's a given. Everyone gets excited about the race. You really feel it, and that's great. The book you wrote is a bestseller. Even before the week of Sanremo, it was a bestseller.
Senza Milano-San Remo è comunque un bestseller.
Now, we've heard from one Sanremo shop owner whose business seems to be going okay, but things have changed over the years and are still changing here on the Ligurian coast. Locals tell you that tourism isn't what it was, that the days when Sanremo was considered the Giardino d'Italia, the Garden of Italy, by virtue of its flower production, are long gone. Two things have remained more or less constant, the Sanremesi say. The music festival that takes place here every February, and which was the inspiration for the Eurovision Song Contest when that started in the 1950s, and the town's passion for la classicissima, the bike race. Scusate signori, io sono un giornalista inglese qua per la corsa. Mi hanno detto che voi sapete chi vince oggi pomeriggio.
Chi vince? L'olandese, secondo me. Van Agermatt. Secondo me. Sa quanto? È uno dei favori.
Peter Sagan.
Okay, ma voi siete sanremesi?
Sì.
E la passione per la gara qua nella città è sempre uguale, no?
A me il ciclismo piace da matti. Io il Giro d'Italia, Tour de France lo seguo, poi la Sanremo è in casa, quindi. Era più corto, quindi.
No, lo sai chi potrebbe vincere se comunque fa una buona discesa, poi c'è un passo devastante, Cancellara è un treno, cioè, capito? Lui si mette a 60 in pianura e chi lo prende? E come fai a prenderlo? Ci devi sparare.
So according to those gentlemen, Sagan could win, the Dutchman Van Avermaet, of course he's not Dutch, he's Belgian. Or they say you might have to get a rifle out and shoot Fabian Cancellara if he attacks off the Poggio. Let's maybe get another point of view. There are a couple of ladies here in the main square, Piazza Colombo, who look as though they might know who will win Milan-San Remo, so let's ask them. Scusate signore, io sono un giornalista qua per la corsa. Voi sapete chi vince oggi?
Lo sapessi. Nibali.
Speriamo. Grazie. Salve. Una fetta di farinata.
Farinata, allora, guarda quanto ne vuoi perché va a peso.
Mangi qua o porti via?
Porto via. Una fetta, sì, così va bene.
Va bene. Fare io a pezzettini, insomma. Ok, va bene.
Perfetto, grazie.
2 euro, grazie.
So I just thought that I'd better channel Lionel Birnie for a minute and sample the local delicacies. You've just heard me order a slice of farinata, which is a kind of greasy chickpea pancake, very traditional in these parts, along with focaccia, which of course you all know and probably love. Here it comes anyway. Lionel, this is for you. I've bumped into a couple of strays in the dark Sanremo night before the race, of course. We've just had dinner, we've had some Ligurian specialities, trofie al pesto, that kind of thing. The strays are Dan Lloyd, who, of course, didn't ride this race, did you, Dan? You're a professional racer but never did Milan-San Remo, but you'll be commentating on the race tomorrow. with Rob Hatch, the sometime voice of cycling, inhabitant of the home of cycling. Anyway, chaps, we're enjoying a beer here. The countdown is on to the big race. Who's going to win, Dan?
Well, that is the big question always with Milan-San Remo, isn't it? There's so many different riders that can win. So you've got the big favourites like Christoph, Peter Sagan. But I'm really hoping to see a big ride from Fabian Cancellara tomorrow. He just seems like he's on incredible form. And I'd like to see him attack either on the Poggio or maybe in the last couple of kilometres, and it seems like he's got what it takes. As you know, I'm a bit of a betting man, do like an outsider. I've got a few longer shots. Navadauskas, I think you mentioned on the podcast last week, is one of those. And I'm just wondering about someone like Arnaud Démare riding for FDJ. He took a win in Paris-Nice last week, but he's still over 50-1 for the race, so I've put about 10 quid each way on him.
Rob Hatch, keep it brief because I think the waiter's limbering up to take our coffee order.
I hope it's not going to be a cappuccino, Dan. I'm looking at you here. It's very, very late in the night. No, it's going to be a day where the tension rises bit by bit as long as we go towards the finish line. We're expecting a sprint, but you never know. Dan talked about Fabian Cancellara. He could have a go in his last race. Gaviria is the one for me, going really, really well at the start of this season. Edic's Quickstep all behind him. Even Tom Bonan's working for Gaviria, we're told, tomorrow. So that's my outside tip.
So let's have our coffees, maybe a grappa, even a limoncello, which I don't usually approve of, and let's see what happens in the morning. Io prendo un cappuccino. Sì, grazie. No, that was not the sound of me ordering a post-dinner cappuccino. It is the morning of the race, and I'm busy with one of the journalists' Sanremo rituals, that is studying the form and the morning papers. A lot of the riders will also have had a glance at La Gazzetta dello Sport before setting off from Milan this morning. In 2009, famously, Mark Cavendish was delighted when La Gazzetta rated him only a 1-star out of 5, meaning that his efforts to slip under the radar had been successful. Cav, of course, went on to win that afternoon. So let's have a look, and La Gazzetta today has got Nibali with 3 stars, Van Avermaet with 3, Buhani and Christoph with 4, Sagan and Cancellara 4.5, and Michael Matthews is the only rider with 5 stars. One rider who isn't here, of course, is 2015 champion John Degenkolb, who suffered a terrible accident in training in January and is still recovering. Several of the giant Alpecin teammates who guided him to victory are racing, and a couple of days ago I caught up with one of them, Koen de Court, to find out how one goes about winning a Milan-San Remo.
We made sure that John was always in the right spot at the right time, and I think that worked out really well. And my role was to be there with him at the bottom of the Cipressa, and then make sure that Tom Dumoulin and John were there in the right spot to get over the Cipressa, and then Tom Dumoulin had to help him get at the right spot at the bottom of the Poggio, and I think it all worked out really, really well, and John was the whole day exactly in the spot that he had to be, and he could save a lot of energy that way, and I think every kilojoule you can save during that almost 300 kilometers you can then spend in the sprint, and I think it was obvious that John had saved the most.
And we've all watched Milan-San Remo for years. We're all very, very familiar with the climbs, the Cipressa, the Poggio. When you're a young rider and you haven't yet ridden Milan-San Remo and then you do it for the first time, what are the most surprising aspects of it? What are the things that really shock you?
I guess when you do recon like we have done today, then you ride around and you ride up the Poggio and you really think, is that it? I can do this big chain ring. It's not that difficult. And I guess it's not. The climb itself, it's not really hard, but when you get there after nearly 300 kilometers, you feel like you're still really strong. You got a lot of energy left, and then you start climbing, and after 100 meters, you just suddenly realize that you got nothing left, and tank's empty, and you're gone. It's really about trying to save as much energy as you can all day. It's such a long race, and then towards the end, it's all of a sudden it's over, and you think you're still there, and you can still make it, and then you're gone.
The distance is a big factor, isn't it? I mean, you guys are used to riding up to 250 kilometres, but do those extra 40 kilometres make a big difference?
I think it definitely does. I guess it's also the nature of the race, where it's just a long time pretty easy, and you feel like it doesn't cost you any energy. But in the end, it definitely does, and then these extra 40, it's also a big difference. I think the biggest change between this and say Roubaix or Flanders, it's in these races it's hard pretty early on already, and you already know what your legs are going to be like, and and you know that everyone's starting to get tired. But here you do the first 250 kilometers and you almost feel like you haven't done anything. And then suddenly the final feels about 5 times as hard. It's all of a sudden it all explodes, and I think that's a big difference to any other race.
And for fans and for journalists waiting in San Remo, it always feels like almost like a tidal wave crashing towards San Remo. It descends and arrives in town very, very quickly once you're on the Cipressa and once you're on the Poggio. Does it all pass very, very quickly when you're in the peloton as well towards the end?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It almost feels like a never-ending race when you start, and these first 150 kilometers, nothing really happens. Then you get the one mountain pass, the Tocchino, and you descend down to the coast, and it's another long time of basically doing nothing, just rolling around and trying to save energy, and then suddenly you come to the Capi, and all of a sudden it's really on, and then you find out very quickly if your legs are as good as you were hoping for or not, and then before you know it, you're in Sanremo. These last 40-50 K is going incredibly fast.
So we've heard how last year's Milan-San Remo was won, but let's find out who's going to win this year's. I'm in the press room now and I've just spotted a very good man to ask, Luca Giallanella, who is the cycling correspondent at La Gazzetta dello Sport. Luca, what's happening in the race?
Well, it's about one hour to the finish. We are entering the real core of Milan-San Remo with Capo Berta, which is the first test for all the leaders. We expect really fireworks from here, from now to the end. The weather is very, very beautiful today. Warm weather. It is 18 degrees, no wind. It's a perfect environment for Milan-San Remo.
Now, Luca, in your newspaper this week, I've noticed more space, more pages than the past few years have been dedicated to Sanremo. Does that mean that Italy is falling in love with cycling again?
Well, we hope so. Milan-San Remo is perhaps the most important race that we have in Italy because of the beginning of the calendar, beginning of the season. Everyone wants to conquer this race. There is a lot of attention from us as well, and we haven't won in Italy Milan-San Remo since 10 years when Pozzato won in 2006.
How could we forget Pozzato's victory?
Yeah, exactly. And in 2 years' time, 2 years in a row, we won with Alessandro Petacchi 2005, Pozzato 2006. Then we had only disappointing results in Milan-San Remo, and we love this race. And our newspaper dedicated today 4 pages. There was a very good presentation yesterday in Piazza della Scala, Scala Square, which is one of the most iconic place in Milan. And so we hope a very good winner. It's very difficult for us as Italians to win today, but
I will ask you for a tip, a pronostico with 40 kilometers to go. Who's going to win, Luca?
I think the strongest is Michael Matthews.
Okay, let's go out to Via Roma and see, shall we?
Okay, thank you.
And here goes the sprint. Bahani's in a perfect position. He's on Van Avermaet's wheel. It's got to be Bahani's. It's got to be Bahani. Démare. Arnaud Démare. Here comes Démare. He's won. Arnaud Démare. Huge surprise. We thought it was going to be one Frenchman, Nasser Bouhanni. And no, the winner was Arnaud Démare. Absolute pandemonium here on Via Roma as always. And a huge, huge surprise. Arnaud Démare winning. Démare's been congratulated now by his teammate Arthur Vichot. Angry bike riders here, absolute chaos at the finish line. The riders have been held up behind a huge scrum of photographers and journalists.
No, ma tutto sommato comunque va bene, si sapeva, non è una corsa che io potevo fare molto di più. No?
That was the voice of Vincenzo Nibali there. A Sanremo for sprinters is what he said, and it truly was, although not all of them made it to the finish line. seeing some pretty battered and bruised riders coming over the finish line. Just been passed by Fernando Gaviria, who's looking very good at one point. His jersey's ripped. He's not looking very happy at all. Down at the FDJ team bus now, just waiting for Ignatas Konovalovas, who was one of the key domestiques for Arnaud Démare today. Here he comes now. Ignatas, big surprise for most people that Arnaud Démare should win Milan-San Remo. Not such a surprise for you, I'd imagine.
We were not expecting that, let's say, loudly saying no, but I think everyone in the team, we had a real goal before the start today, that we do everything to get the victory. I have to say that I wasn't so much surprised, because it's already second time this year that he surprised me. The same was with the victory on the Paris-Nice. Of course, it's surprising, it's a nice thing, but somewhat deeply I was expecting that.
And tell us a little bit about the race. Was Arnaud saying all day that he was feeling good, and what was your role?
Everyone had exactly the same roles. The roles, not the same, but everyone had different roles in different parts of the race. My role was actually to try to save as much energy as I can and to come to Cipressa with Arnaud. And then, let's say, if there was work to do, my job was to done it between the two hills, Cipressa and Poggio. So actually it happened exactly like this, because there was a crash that he was involved just before Cipressa. So he was distanced and he came back just on the top of Cipressa to the peloton. We had one guy that was pulling all Cipressa for him to bring him back. I was staying in the back of the bunch because I felt if I go back, I was not sure that I will come back with him, you know. So I said it's better I stay here and then just in case. So exactly when we go down to the main road from Cipressa after downhill, then we had to close quite a big gap. I mean, with that speed, it was a big gap. We could see the bunch in front, but you could almost touch it, but you couldn't close the gap by your feet. So that was a bit hard work to done. And then there was few more guys that led him in the good position into the Poggio. And then on the Poggio, me in the mid Poggio, I got dropped.
Big celebration tonight?
Yeah, actually, I hope so. I didn't bring Jean with me, but maybe the shop opened. But actually, I was thinking before coming here, I said, because it's only for one day, you know, just to sit in the plane, do the race, sit in the plane back. I said, to be more comfortable, I'll just come with the jogging pants and things like this, you know. But then I said, okay, maybe I take Jean just in case with me.
You'll know next time.
And then I said, no, if I take jeans with me, there was nothing to celebrate, so I left it at home.
The next time you'll be here with your Levi 501s, well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Ouais, je pense que ça ne changera pas grand-chose. On va retrouver les mêmes. Je pense que c'est plus au niveau de l'équipe que ça va changer. Moi, personnellement, les ambitions
So you may just have heard Arnaud Démare's voice there. I'm back at the press room for Démare's winners press conference. Just also looking at the results from today's race. Second was Ben Swift in the end from Team Sky. Third, Jürgen Roelandts of Lotto Soudal, so quite a surprising top three really. Démare obviously enjoyed his day here on the Ligurian Riviera. I hope you've also enjoyed this small taste of what was the 107th edition of Milan-San Remo, La Classicissima.
You're listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast with Richard Moore, Lionel Birnie and Daniel Friebe.
Excellent work, Daniel, but it doesn't
I feel like I was there, Daniel. That was wonderfully atmospheric.
It was, yeah. You sounded a little sarcastic there, Richard.
No, I enjoyed it immensely.
Good.
Thank you.
Controversy kicked up in the hours after the finish of the race when two Italian riders, Matteo Tozzato of Tinkoff and Eros Capecchi of Astana, alleged that Arnaud Démare, who was one of the fallers in the crash before the Cipressa, had, in their words, or in Tozzato's words, come past at 80 kilometres an hour on the Cipressa, holding on to the Francis Dejeux team car, holding on to a team car. Details are pretty sketchy, and this all blew up, as it often does. Trial by social media was then in session. Arnaud Démare was urged to put his Strava records up just so we could see how the race had unfolded for him and see whether there were any anomalies on the Cipressa. Everything seemed sort of normal with that. Then the file disappeared again off Strava's website, and then it came back. All sorts of...
And then we found out that Cipressa, translated into English, is grassy knoll.
Exactly. Well, I think once we have solved this mystery, we should look back at the footage from November 1963
and
Twitter
see if existed then.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wouldn't have been all 30, 40, however, 50 years, 60 years of
we'd all have been suspects,
intrigue.
wouldn't we?
So it has cast a cloud over the race. But I mean, where are we now?
Where are we, Lionel?
Well, we're in a yet another kind of mire of.
Poor old Lionel. He came in this morning looking shattered and said, "It's been a grueling weekend on Twitter."
Well, it's just the problem is there's so many, claims and counterclaims. And the worst thing is this jigsaw attempt at coming to justice. People taking Google Street View images.
This is where we lament the death of newspapers and authoritative journalism, or Twitter as a substitute for that, because there is no sort of hierarchy of facts, or no distinction between facts and conjecture and evidence and rumours and innuendo. I mean, even, hours after there was a picture posted of a Francis de Joux rider holding onto a team car. It turned out it was Arthur Vichot in another race on another day, another year.
On the Turquino earlier in Sanremo, yeah.
Oh, sorry, all that really matters is it wasn't Arnaud Démare on the Cipressa. Many hours after that had been debunked by the always very measured blogger Inner Ring, among others, Patrick Lefevre, of all people, posted it. And, and that sets it off again. And a lot of people who've not caught up with the fact that it's a misleading picture then weigh in. And there's no, as I say, no hierarchy of facts and there's no sort of who's the authority.
I think the first thing is that the clamour for the Strava file was the first wrong step in the quest to find out what's gone on, because all the Strava file will tell you is how fast the bike was travelling on the Cipressa. It doesn't tell you how the bike was being propelled. What it does tell you is that Démare didn't go past Tozzato and Capecchi at 80 kilometres an hour as they had said, but then, Tozzato's talking in the immediate aftermath of the race. He's not giving evidence to court, is he? He's talking loosely to journalists.
Exaggerating and embellishing.
Can I give a bit of context?
Do.
I want to talk about politics, peloton politics. Now, I'm not saying that these allegations are unfounded and that Démare didn't take a tow or didn't drop. I have no idea. However, yesterday I posted on Twitter that FDJ are one of 3 World Tour teams with not a single Italian staff member. I've subsequently learned they actually are working with a physiotherapist, an Italian physiotherapist, but on a freelance basis. But what I was trying to say is the peloton is this huge ecosystem which works a bit like a vast Venn diagram. And in the middle is a huge melting pot of people who have crossed each other's paths in previous teams, or they're friends, or they socialise together. And the Italian peloton is very prominent in this, and there are an awful lot of Italians working in professional cycling. FDJ is really an island, and it's really almost a unique case in the professional peloton in that they have almost no relationship with the Italian peloton. And this might surprise some people, but you only have to go to a race and watch riders go to sign on, etc. And it will surprise some people that some of the riders don't even acknowledge each other. And Arnaud Démare may never have had a conversation with Matteo Tozzato or Eros Capecchi. What does this mean? Not necessarily that they have exaggerated or that they have lied when they've spoken to a journalist from La Gazzetta dello Sport after the finish line, but that a dispute like this, or a disagreement, might have been resolved in a different way if it had been a rider from another team apart from FDJ, and it might not have played out in the media. For example, I think often how these disputes and differences of opinion are resolved is that a rider will get back to their bus and they will say, Démare, I saw Démare on the Cipressa, he was behind a car, he was taking a tow, and the director sportif who has previously worked in Démare's team, or the soigneur who used to work at FDJ, or someone who knows someone will send a text message, or they will call each other up, and they will kind of resolve the problem in the family, as it were. But there is no relationship between FDJ and Italian riders like Tozzato and Capecchi. And I think that is probably why they felt almost completely unshackled after the finish line. Someone asked them what had happened. And that's probably why they said something which sounded so outrageous. It was 80 kilometres an hour. It sounded like the most flagrant thing they'd ever seen. And I'm not sure that would have been the case if it had been another rider.
That close-knit nature of the group that you describe has, of course, led in the past to the suspicion or the allegations of a omerta, that helped to preserve the doping culture and the secrecy around the doping culture. And in a way, it's great that riders have spoken out about alleged cheating and we can debate it in public. I mean, the question is, there are lots of aspects of the Cipressa and Milan-San Remo that are relevant here too. The fact is that there was a crash at the bottom. The team cars will then be very keen to stick as close to the back of the group as possible to help any riders who might be in difficulty. Very difficult to imagine a car racing through there 80 kilometres an hour anyway. I think and Démare has admitted that he drafted the team car, and I don't think anybody would expect him not to, especially if the cars are packed behind the group, as they doubtless were.
Having spoken to a couple of riders who saw Démare on Cipressa and also saw Kopecky and Tosato, so knew exactly where they had been, I think there is a feeling that there was a big advantage to be almost behind on the Cipressa on Saturday, because there was a big headwind on Cipressa. That was one of the reasons why we didn't see many attacks on Cipressa on the Poggio. And Matthews and Démare were coming back after their... Michael Matthews, he'd also crashed on the last of the Capi, and they were coming back, and, they may well have been behind cars, not unusual. So they were probably coming quite quickly to the bottom of the Cipressa and maybe some way up the Cipressa. In the peloton, they were battling this headwind, and then there's a moment when the Cipressa turns right, and it's actually the toughest ramp on the Cipressa. It goes to about 10%, the gradient. And there was a crash there. The peloton sort of bottlenecked, and I think Pete Kenyon came down. I think Mark Cavendish was held up, various other riders, and Tosato and Kopecky were also held up. They then had to get going again, and they had to almost sprint to get going, but they were battling this headwind, and it is quite hard to pick up momentum there from a standing start. And it was at that point, I understand, that Démare appeared, and there may have been a team car in close attendance, but I can quite easily see how it looked to Kopecky and Tosato that Démare was going incredibly quickly, certainly compared to them.
It's feasible, as you say, that in those circumstances, in those conditions, riding up the Cipressa behind a team car, you could easily go up it quicker than the guys riding up it in the bunch. That's perfectly feasible.
Absolutely. Lionel mentioned the Strava file. The Strava file indicated that his top speed was 52 kilometres an hour. Fred Grapp, the FDJ physiologist, has said his top speed was actually 48 kilometres an hour. Still very quick, but there's a disparity there. And Fred has also said that he's willing to disclose Démare's power files, his SRM data, but that needs to be in a forum where an independent commission can look at it and they can draw their own
Again, we go
conclusions.
back to the discussion we have every year at the Tour. The danger in releasing this sort of data is that you leave yourself open to trial by Twitter and analysis by people not qualified to analyse it. Another point on that, Simon Yates also tweeted that he clocked 54 kilometres going over the top of the Cipressa. So the claim that Démare hit 52 kilometres an hour didn't surprise him.
But the other thing is that this technology, whether it be Strava, whether it be a power crank, they're not flawless in the sense that they don't capture. When you look at the data they capture, the big picture is very helpful. But when you really drill down to the absolute second by second numbers that are captured, there are big anomalies sometimes just because of the way that the information is gathered. But I think the wider issue here is that we're entering into a situation where the scrutiny and the ease with which Tosato and Kopecky, by making their comments publicly, created a huge controversy. This has been going on. The method of getting back on after a crash or a mechanical problem, this is nothing new. This is what we've actually got is with everyone outside is kind of being given a tour of the sausage factory, and they're seeing what goes into the sausages, and more so than perhaps they would have done in the past. And there's been plenty of controversies. I think back to the 1984 Giro when Laurent Fignon lost to Francesco Moser in the final time trial, and the allegation had always been that the TV helicopter, or one of the race helicopters, was basically blowing.
It arranged itself directly behind Moser.
Right behind Moser and right in front of Fignon to give the Italian an advantage in his home race and give the pink jersey Fignon a disadvantage. And that is almost one of the stories that it's another one of the bricks in the kind of the legend of professional cycling. And yes, there was a controversy, and I'm sure, Fignon talked about that pretty much to his dying day, about how he felt he was the rightful winner of that race. That controversy burned on.
Riders I've spoken to who, like I said before, were on the Cipressa, saw Démare, they've all said the same thing, that really it's down to the commissaires there to spot something and to take action. And they are pretty much united in saying that they probably would have done, they'd been behind a team car in a headwind going up the Cipressa, they would have stayed there.
What's the alternative? Yeah, holding on to the car is a different thing entirely. But you've got to sit behind the team car going up the Cipressa when the car... I mean, what's the alternative? That you ride out in the wind? Nobody's going to do that.
Can I say one last thing about also the context of how this story broke and why it broke? Again, talks about FDJ not really having any relationship with the Italian peloton. They also don't have any relationship at all with the Italian media. And, you know, Capecchi and Tosato come over the line. They see a friendly face, Claudio Ghisalberti, who's a journalist who's worked for Gazzetta dello Sport for, you know, a long time. And they're completely unguarded. They say exactly what they think they saw, maybe. I don't know whether they exaggerated, but they talk in a manner to him that they wouldn't talk to another journalist. And then the journalist goes back to the press room and he talks to his editor, and this is how it tends to work. You know, what have we got for tomorrow? We've got, you know, a French guy's won. What about Best Italian? Best Italian's Pozzato 8th. Are we going to do a big story on Pozzato? Well, I would have loved them to do a big story on Pozzato, but it's not a huge story. And they go, well, what have you got?
And not a lot else happened.
No, and you've got these allegations. Great, half page, let's go half page. Should we not give FDJ right of reply? Will it not annoy them? You know, will we burn a bridge with FDJ? Like Gazzetta dello Sport never speaks to Frances Desjeux. But if those allegations had been put to a L'Equipe journalist, the first thing L'Equipe would have done would be to phone up FDJ. The situation probably would have been diffused. Marc Madio would have said, wow, hang on, you know, look.
In a very measured way.
In a very measured way. And it would have played out completely differently. And again, I'm not suggesting this alters the content of actually what happens, but it certainly tells you a little bit more about why this has become such a storm in a teacup.
Eurosport, the home of cycling.
Okay, you heard there our Eurosport jingle. Thank you very much once again to Eurosport for sponsoring the cycling podcast this year. And it's one of the busiest weeks in the calendar as far as Eurosport are concerned. They are broadcasting live the Tour of Catalonia, which is going on at the moment with a lot of the big Grand Tour favourites riding Quintana, Froome, Contador, all in action in Catalonia. On Friday, E3 Harelbeke, another Belgian cobbled classic, which is a great race, won, of course, last year by Geraint Thomas. Coming up at the weekend, 26th, 27th, Criterium International on Eurosport. And next week, the 3 days of Japan, and then we're into some more monuments, Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, etc., etc. So lots coming up on Eurosport, the home of cycling. But let's carry on chatting about Milan-San Remo for a bit. Arnaud Démare. What do we make of his win? I mean, he's not come from nowhere. He's somebody who showed great promise a couple of years ago. He's still only 24 years old. Seemed to have a disappointing year last year, but is talking now, I think, about focusing less on bunch sprints and Grand Tours and more on one-day races. Is that correct, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, he's the kind of rider who I think will always be able to compete in bunch sprints and, well, hopefully from his point of view, in the cobbled classics. But really, this is the continuation, and we heard in my little postcard from Sanremo from Ignatas Konovalovas, Démare's teammate, we heard him talk about the success that FDJ have been having at the start of this 2016 season. And this really is the continuation of what is a great story. And it's the story of a team who, because they were getting their heads kicked in for many years, you know, I think there was an attitude of pessimism in the team, certainly when they felt that other riders and other teams were doping, and it was cyclisme à deux vitesses, two-speed cycling. But then there came a point 4 or 5 years ago where they did think they could compete, and they've really gone down the route that Sky and a lot of other teams purport to have gone down, you know, really looking very, very hard at technology, marginal gains. You know, they've got a new nutritionist this year that they've taken from Cofidis, and they've really gone to town on that kind of work, and, you know, winning team time trials, doing very well in individual time trials. Now we've got Démare winning a monument, the first monument that a French rider has won since 1997. So a brilliant sort of feel-good story for French cycling.
And Démare, who people, if they fly Ryanair, will think comes from Paris, but it comes from Beauvais, some distance outside Paris, in the north of France. He is one of these guys, a bit like Degenkolb, who won last year, who has got a very fast finish, but perhaps isn't in the very top rank of sprinters. And he's a big, strong rider, isn't he? But is he somebody who could Well, Ghent-Wevelgem is an obvious race for him. Paris-Roubaix, perhaps, eventually. I mean, 24 years old, he could develop into quite a strong rider in these races.
Yeah, Paris-Roubaix is certainly a race that he wants to focus on and will expect to do well in, but I think Saturday just underlined the continuing emergence of this sort of sprinter, classics, almost puncher hybrid. And, you look at the number of riders who are in contention on Saturday. Gaviria, Buhani.
Both took themselves out quite spectacularly.
Sagan, even Ben Swift, Jürgen Roelandts, and the competition in that bracket of riders is very, very intense. And, Degenkolb wasn't there. Buhani, the other side of the coin as far as French cycling was concerned, we've talked a lot about Buhani already this year, and I thought he was, well, as you heard in my postcard from San Remo there, I was convinced that he was going to win with about 150 metres to go. I think we mentioned a couple of weeks ago his little outburst in a French documentary about the bikes at Cofidis earlier in the season. He wasn't very happy because he had a mechanical problem at a training camp and he threw a bit of a tantrum. Well, there was an even bigger tantrum after Saturday's race. I think he jumped on his bike. He put his bike on the floor and jumped on it and broke the frame.
That usually fixes the gears.
Yeah, just beyond the finish line. And it was slightly... There were echoes of David Miller's outburst about Cofidis's equipment after the 2003 prologue in the Tour de France. I remember didn't he take the mechanics over to the Oncé bus and said, this is how you should be working?
Yeah, although Miller insisted that one of the chain rings come off beforehand and that he didn't have a front mech, and that was why his chain came off. But Buhani did look... And then the whole Démare debate wouldn't have happened. But... he had a bit of a Démare, didn't he, Buhani? He was perfectly placed. I mean, he's faster than Démare, isn't he, on paper? Would he not have won? Would Gaviria have won? Gaviria, who I thought looked behind him and then that caused his crash.
Gaviria almost looked too relaxed.
It looked like Van Avermaet cut across him. He maybe wasn't paying attention, but
he just looked so sure of himself with 300 metres to go that he seemed to relax, and it was a very strange crash, wasn't it?
It was.
It was a very strange crash, but it's when you see a crash like that, it's remarkable how everybody got round it, considering how close they were riding together, the bike handling and the reactions after nearly 300 kilometres of riding from Peter Sagan.
After more than 300 kilometres on this occasion.
Cancellara. Well, if you include the neutralised zone.
And the extra bit, did that not take it over 300 kilometres because of the detour?
Yeah, onto the motorway. Yeah, I mean, it was an action-packed finish, which it so often is at Milan-San Remo, and it still was a group of kind of horses and greyhounds in that final group, wasn't it? And I thought Gaviria looked like one of the greyhounds who might have that fast finish at the end, but we didn't get to see it.
And just as a slight counterpoint to what I said about this tier of riders that's emerged who seem ideal for Milan-San Remo on paper, they can climb a bit, or they can certainly get over the Poggio and sprint. They're all potentially drinking in the last chance saloon when they go to Milan-San Remo, because there is this threat, this hanging over the peloton, that Milan-San Remo is going to change quite radically every year. And particularly after an edition like Saturday's, there was a lot of talk in the paper or in the La Gazzetta and other papers on Sunday morning about San Remo being too sprinter friendly, and maybe now is the time. And I know we hear this almost every year, but this might be the time, particularly with the figurehead of Italian cycling being Vincenzo Nibali, and we've seen him year after year after year try and get away, and he did again on Saturday, and it would have been a fantastic moment, a fantastic day for Italian cycling if he had won. It might just be that as almost a parting gift to Vincenzo Nibali before he retires, that Mauro Vegni at RCS decides it's the time to throw in the climb we've heard so much about at La Pompeiana, or make some of the change which makes it less conducive to a sprint finish.
The Telegraph Cycling Podcast, brought to you by Trainer Road, cycling's most effective training tool. Pair your power meter with over 800 workouts and 80 training plans to make you a faster cyclist. Visit trainerroad.com/TCP to try Trainer Road risk-free for 30 days.
You heard our extended Trainer Road jingle there. The second last time you'll be hearing that on the podcast, I think, because next week is our big challenge. And today, or this week rather, we've released a mini episode that kind of charts our progress with Trainer Road. The three of us, myself, Lionel, Birnie and Rob Hatch, have followed the Trainer Road programme for 5 months now, and we've just made this little episode just for a bit of fun, really. We've got a bit of Chris Hoy in there as well, offering me some training tips.
Cheating, that really, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, but I've got marginal gains, Lionel, and we've been working hard, and it's all coming down to the Manchester Velodrome on the 29th of March. If anybody wants to come along, it's 9 o'clock in the morning.
Don't say that.
We're going to record stuff there. We're going to have it videoed as well, so it should be available for people to watch if they're interested. But yeah, Trainer Road have been a fantastic sponsor for us over the winter, and a huge thank you to them. We hope we can do something with them again in the future, because it's been great on many different levels, but primarily for you, the listener, it's helped us to keep the podcast free throughout the winter. So thank you very much indeed to Trainer Road. So we've got that little episode on our Trainer Road Progress, which you'll find in all the usual places. Our next Friends special, our third one of the year, is being released as well this week. Lionel, it's imminent, and this is your baby.
Yeah, it's called Flanders Fever, and it's capturing the sounds of bike racing in Flanders. We're about to enter the most magical part of the season for me. I think we've got Grand Prix E3, Ghent-Wevelgem, 3 days of Depanner, and then the Tour of Flanders, and this is an attempt to capture some of the atmosphere of those races.
Some funny stuff in there?
Some quirky stuff in there.
Some quirky stuff in there. I'm looking forward to hearing it. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm very much looking forward to hearing it. We'll play a little bit of it in next week's regular episodes, so if anybody hasn't signed up as a friend, they can have a little flavour of it. But if you do want to become a friend of the podcast, it's £10. Go to thecyclingpodcast.com and become a friend of the podcast. You'll get 11 special episodes plus a little bonus episode, which is me in conversation with Geraint Thomas in Manchester towards the end of last year. And thank you very much to everybody who has already signed up as a friend of the podcast. It's very much appreciated. Shall we just talk again very briefly on Milan-San Remo, because I mentioned at the start that Team Sky rode a good race. Obviously Ben Swift finished second, his second time on the podium. But they seem to have a decent strategy, having Stannard attack on the Cipressa, Kwiatkowski attack on the Poggio. Without the headwinds, would they have perhaps succeeded with those moves?
As the Italians say, if my aunt had wheels, she'd be a wheelbarrow. No,
that's better than the. I think that's better than the alternative version I've heard of that.
What is it?
And more suitable.
Anyway, I don't really want to talk about the Polish chap because he is our phonetic bête noire, and last week I got some grief for calling him a vanity signing, which was probably fair because I sort of overlooked the fact that he might fill a hole for them as far as the Ardennes Classics were concerned. But he does look in good form, doesn't he?
He does look in good form.
And he also clearly quite likes Milan-San Remo. He's attacked a couple of times on the Poggio, hasn't he, in previous years? And it's just, Nibali said on the eve of the race that however much attacks on the descent of the Poggio can look spectacular, and they might keep everyone's heart in their mouth for a few seconds and raise people's hopes. Usually the position you're in at the top of the Poggio is the position you're in when you come to the kilometre kite, and there's not a whole lot you can do on the Poggio descent.
Good result by Ben Swift, though, to finish second, his second time on the podium in this race. Very close, but not quite getting the edge on the line. But that was what you were saying, Richard. They had a plan there. They've taken a lot of criticism, Team Sky, for the way they've ridden in the one-day races, but that was a plan.
They ran generally. And they took the race on here, didn't they? And
just on Ben Swift, he's a guy that, unbeknownst to a lot of people, I think battles on a daily basis with the legacy of injuries that he's had, and in particular shoulder injuries, and it's a real struggle sometimes, I think, for him to get fit and stay fit and to sprint, because those are muscles or joints that he has to use a lot when he's sprinting. And notwithstanding that, he still pulls out some fantastic results and was clearly in really good form at the moment.
He is. Excellent. Well, we'll wrap it up for this week. There's lots for you to listen to, so we'll be back again next week talking about, I would think, the Tour of Catalonia, as well as E3, Ghent-Wevelgem, lots to talk about. So for this week, thank you very much, Daniel Friebe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast. Thank you to Glass Pear for the music in this episode. For more information and to download more editions of the show, visit thecyclingpodcast.com.